Hey guys, we're back in the workshop and today I've got a pretty cool project for you. And as you might have heard in the last video, if you have watched it, I've said this. So I would do it again, but it will probably take some time. And my inner ego was like, I cannot stand it like that. And I've made a bigger drawing of a hidden Tang knife. And as you can see, we've got some Damascus in it with some core. And I don't have the forge press to forge out that big piece of billet of steel. So went to my friend Kurt Glatt of Glatt Knives, and he has a 50-ton press. He built everything by himself, and he's just in for knife making for around about a year, and he makes already great knives, and he has so many cool tools in his workshop. So went there and we forged some steel together. So my friend already prepared 3 of these billets of steel, and we're using 2 kinds of steel, and one has a lot of nickel in it so it doesn't etch that deep, and we also added some borax to it, and the borax keeps out some of the impurities. And the first forge welds are the most important ones, and the temperature has to be really exact, and the core of the billet also needs to be super hot so everything forges nicely together and sticks together. And for me, it was just crazy to see that 50-ton press going to work and slamming that steel down. It's super satisfying to watch that scales just popping off from the sides of the steel, and it's just amazing to work with a tool like that. And after the forge welds were successful, we have drawn out the billet to a certain length so we can cut it up and restack it again. First quick test edge to see that everything is right, and after that we surface ground the finish so we can re-weld those billets back together. And now we have like a super huge billet because we put a lot of layers back together, and now these forge welds need to be just on point, and we luckily had no problems with that. And again, just amazing to watch how that scale just pops off, and that billet just radiates so much heat. It's really crazy. That billet is super hot. And then we did everything again, squish it down, forge it down to a certain size. And after that, because of the size of the billet and the forge press, even though it has 50 tons, it cannot press deeper. So we had to use this roll to flatten out that piece of steel even more to a certain length. And when we had the certain length that we wanted, we have cut it up again, reground it, and then we have tack welded together. But this time we added that 80 CRV core into the middle, and now we just have to forge weld it back together. And again, we use that roll to roll out the steel to a certain length, but the roll gives you a really crazy curve, so we had to reforge it so the billet is not too curved. And now I'm back with the piece of steel, and I still have to do a lot of work on this piece of steel, so let's get started. And if you have watched my other videos, you know
everything about the profiling with the hollow grinding wheel. It just takes less time and less strain on my flat platen. So interest me, what do you guys think about these voiceovers? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Just drop it down into the comments, because I try to put as many informations into my videos as possible.
So the kukri is now roughly shaped, and before I do any kind of more work onto that knife, I want to normalize it because the steel went through a lot of stresses, and I noticed that while I was grinding I had like hardened spots because steel, also carbon steel, can air harden. It doesn't get as hard as normal steel, but we just want to have a uniform steel structure in that steel, and we are doing that with soaking in that steel and letting it out to the air, cool it slowly down, and repeating that for a couple of cycles so don't get any cracks in that knife or warps. So we want to have a really nice uniform steel structure in that blade. So the knife is now normalized and I'm nearly ready to grind the bevels for the preheat treatment grind. But before that I have to work on the tang because the tang is a little bit thicker, and I'm doing that with my disc grinder most of the times, so everything is nice and flat. So now the tang is flattened and I'm going to start out now with the preheat treatment grind. And you don't want to grind it too thinly before the heat treatment because we don't want to have that knife to warp, and I'd rather grind that knife after the heat treatment a little bit more with some fresh belts and have a nice straight knife instead of like a banana, and we don't want to have that. So let's get grinding.
So when I rough grind my bevels in, I always want to use older belts because those hard 90 degrees angles on the steel, they can really rip out the ceramic bits on the belt, and therefore I'm just using these older belts. And you can see on this knife we have a crazy recurve in it, so you always want to work from the left hand or the right hand corner of your belt so you don't get any kind of belt bites. So it's easier to work just on a corner and then feather it in later.
The knife is now ready to be heat treated, and you can pause that video now, drop a comment down below if the knife stays straight or not, and leave your guesses down below. Alright, so the knife came out not too straight, but luckily it was just bent like that and it wasn't like twisted. Because twisted bends, it's really hard to get out of your knife, but this one I could quickly get into the vise and straighten up, and now everything looks really nice and neat.
So now I'm just squaring up the tang with my file guide, because we need a really nice 90-degree angle on these shoulders, so later on we can fit on that guard really nicely and we don't have any kind of gaps.
So the tang is now squared up, and I've also quickly cut out some mild steel because I want to use this piece as the guard right here, and I want to start working on this now because I want to get it out of my mind, because the guard is one of the trickiest parts to do for this knife, so I want to have it done by today.
So when I'm measuring everything out, my brain is still sometimes just freezing and thinking about what am I actually doing at the moment. So it's sometimes really hard to alright which measurements I need, but it gets faster and faster the more knives I build just like that. So the filing process always looks so fast because those videos are always sped up and you just see small bits of footage, and I'm still not sure if I like the process or not. It's super satisfying when that guard finally fits on, but the work beforehand is sometimes super tedious.
Alright guys, so the guard is on, and I'm so glad that this guard fits now so much better than the other knife that I did before. Especially now, this is my second hidden Tang knife, and I'm pretty happy that everything worked out much better. Of course, the stock of the guard is much thinner, but I'm pretty happy on how everything looks so far. So now I can start working on the blade, and after that I can do the handle for this knife.
Now back at the grinder, I was super happy with the guard fit up, and I could just jump in straight into a really nice grind, and I always grind better when I'm in a good mood and I don't really have to think about grinding, and then I get better grinds. It's super weird. And now I'm just using some fresh balls to just shred all the material away that I don't need and don't want to have, but I have to be careful so I don't burn out the edge of the knife. So I always dunk the knife into water and I don't let my belt run too fast.
Alright, you can't see me. Great. Ground, and now I have to, of course, hand sand it. We all love hand sanding. So we'll start with the Tang, and then I will move on to the blade, but I will just give it a rough 240 or 320 grit finish, because then I want to work on the handle. And after that I can finish up the finish, but I want to get the hand sanding, the tedious part, out of the way.
So I kind of enjoy hand sanding, but I also don't. It just depends on the steel. Some steels you can hand sand really nice. For example, like carbon steels, 80 CRV, you can hand sand them really well and quite fast, but compare that to like a Magna Cut or K390 steel, these steels are just horrible. And it was actually so much fun to hand sand that blade, because I was just waiting to etch that blade and to slowly see that pattern just through that hand sanded finish was just such a big reward.
So the knife is now roughly hand sanded to around 320 grit, and now I want to start working on this wood. I have no clue what this is. Maybe it's Paduk. It's kind of reddish wood, but before I can start laying out any kind of measurements on that block, it's really not square, and I have to square it up, and after that I can start laying out some measurements for fitting this one up onto the knife.
So this grinder like that makes your work and your life so much easier, because it's so nice to have everything to a 90-degree angle. You have flat edges so you can measure off of them, put your measurements on, and I've made a paper template of the handle so I could just place it on with a Sharpie and then just cut it out. And also, again, making some measurements, because with hidden tangs you need a lot of measurements, and It takes me some times, but I get around it, and where to measure everything and how to place those marks onto the wood and then just drilling it out.
I also have to finish up this piece of mild steel, which will turn into the guard we have already filed the slot in, but now I have to do everything else, so shaping it, finishing it up, because this one has to be also finished before the glue up. Alright guys, so the guard is now on and I'm pretty happy. I still have to make the final finishes to it, but before I want to work on the handle, because now I have to shape out the handle and you have to move that wood back and forth, and I don't want to scratch up the guard while doing that. And I'm pretty happy with the fitment of that hole and the tang. I'm pretty happy with that. And now I'm just going to shape out this handle.
Grinding wood with like a 50 grit ceramic belt is so satisfying, because that material just removes away, and it's so satisfying just to watch how that wood just turns into dust by the belt grinder. And that handle was actually really fun to sculpt on those hollow grinding wheels, and it was something different that I'd never done, like a contoured handle like that, and it was a lot of fun to make.
Alright, so the handle now doesn't fit on. Perfect. Alright, so the handle is now fitting on, and nice. Now it's just the final step. So I have to now finish up the guard, hand polish this blade to its final finish, and then etch it. And already it feels amazing, and I just want to get that knife done.
So after the hand sanding part, I etched that knife with some ferric chloride mixed with water, and that ferric chloride just gives us a really nice contrast between the bright nickel steel and the darker carbon steel. And I was so pumped when I had everything on. I had the guard, I had the knife was edged, the wood was done, and I just had to glue it up. And then I had some problems with hydrolocking, so that means there was too much glue in it, and I couldn't squeeze down the knife too much into the knife, and it was pushing out, so I had to take some epoxy out, and the clamp was sometimes slipping away from the handle actually. So my thought is behind that I should start grinding that handle after everything is glued up, but I just wanted to get that knife done because I was so happy. And here you can see my gluing up construction, and now it's just oiling up the handle, and I was so stoked. I was so freaking happy about that knife.
Alright guys, the kukri is done and I'm pretty happy with it. It looks amazing, especially it is my second hidden tang. And looking back to last week's video where I wasn't happy with my hidden Tang, I'm now much more happy. There are still of course some minor flaws, but for now I'm pretty happy, and I'm also happy that I challenged myself again and redid a hidden Tang, and now I'm pretty happy with that knife. So guys, tell me in the comments down below, what do you think about this knife? Do you like this kind of bigger knife? And what do you think about the handle and the guard? And of course I had to add some stonewash to it. You know, you have to sometimes stay in your lane as well. And what do you think about the Damascus? Should I do more stuff like that? Just drop it down in the comments. And if you like knife content, hit that subscribe button. I will post videos every Friday. And if you have any questions or suggestions, just drop them down below into the comment section. I try to answer them as quickly as possible, and we'll see us next Friday.